Well, Isaac Simmons, welcome to Hope and Anchor.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Great to see you. You know, we are thinking of Hope and Anchor as sort of a virtual pub table where friends and strangers meet up and talk about life and spirituality. And obviously, we're not at a real pub table. We're in a Zoom room. I think I'm in London. You are in right now San Francisco. So
Yeah.
8 hours apart, but still here we are by God's grace and the power of Zoom.
It is a big pub table.
It's a big pub table.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. We're so glad to have you with us. And we like to ask all our guests just to get started. You know, where are you right now? I sort of just gave that away. Where are you in the world right now? And what is your local? A local in Britain, where we're doing the show from, a local is like your local pub, but it could also be your local, sort of, we're trying to broaden that out. So like your local, the place where you go in your community, where you meet up with friends on a regular basis, meet new friends. So it could be your local pub or bar, it could be your local coffee shop, it could be your local dog park or AA meeting. Where are you and what's your local?
Yeah. So right now I'm in San Francisco, but typically I'm over in Bloomington, Illinois, right smack in the middle. And my local is a place called The Bistro. There are no sandwiches sold there. It is the premier gay bar, the only gay bar of Bloomington, Illinois. And so it's just this beautiful, wonderful little hole in the wall type of pub that I can go to and just hang out with all my friends. Yeah.
I love it. So a big difference between San Francisco, where you are right now, and Bloomington normal. Like that's like, you know,
yeah.
Three different places.
Absolutely. It's a whole different world here.
I want to hear more. We're going to hear more about that in the interview. I want to hear more about Bloomington normal. But so you, Isaac Simmons, are many things. You are in professional life. You are the operations director for a United Methodist Church plant in Bloomington Normal, which is a university town. For those of you who don't know Bloomington Normal, y'all got a ministry with loads of folks there, but lots of college and university students. But you also, in another part of your life and ministry, you serve or preach or minister in the drag persona of Miss Pentecost.
Hey.
And I read that you are reportedly the first drag queen ever accepted as a candidate for ordained ministry in the United Methodist Church. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's a great line.
Yeah, I know. It's great. I am waiting for the day that someone's like, I was the first one. But so far, all of the news media people have said it. So
right, you're a pioneer. You're a first there kind of person. I love that.
Yes.
Anyone who could Google you and find out loads of information about you and what you do. And I want to hear some of that story, but I'm just always curious to ask guests, you know, we can go on and read about you, the what you do, but I'm always curious about the why beneath the what. So why are you an operations director at a United Methodist Church plant? Why are you a drag queen evangelist? Like what keeps you up at night? What's the burning fire in your heart that says, I've got to do this?
That is a beautiful question. I think, so the reason why I'm an operations director is because I originally was a coordinator of remote learning. So we turned our sanctuary at Hope Church into a remote learning program and brought in all these about 40 kids from third grade to senior year of high school during the COVID-19 pandemic, who weren't able to do classes at home. And so I started there, the school year ended, and Hope was like, why don't we just keep you on staff? And so I continued in a new role. That's how I got there. But the real passion is a sense for fighting for or bringing about justice and equity in the community, in the sense that there is a huge discrepancy, not only in my community, but around the world, in access to learning, access to equitable wages, access to LGBTQIA plus rights, and just love in general. And so I would like that not to be the case anymore. But I am but one drag queen. Yeah, it's about working with people, connecting with people, letting folks know that they're loved and worthy of their stories in life. Yeah, so I do that through drag and through stitching together services for the church. Yeah.
I love it. So you're like this, you're a tiny little pixel in God's universe, but a beautiful diamond pixel, you know, a beautiful jewel, one drag queen.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
I have to say, I have a friend who went to Wild Goose this year. And for those of you who are watching at home, in Britain, Wild Goose in the US is sort of like Greenbelt, which is an outdoor festival here, Isaac.
Yeah.
And she said she went and it was all great. She loved it. It was her first time to go. But she said the crowds outside your tent were like the most massive. People were trying to get in to hear Miss Pentecost, you drag. So I just got to ask the question, like, what is it about doing drag? Like, why would you think of doing drag evangelism? Like, what's that about?
Yeah. So for me, drag, the history of drag has been about empowerment and community building. And it's also about laughter and joy and just like being who you are. And to me, that is the message of the gospel, is about being a community, empowering others and being exactly who you are created to be in God. So like my drag persona was born out of a research paper in undergrad on Mikhail Bakhtin, who's an old Russian philosopher guy. And he wrote this thing called The Carnivalesque and the Grotesque. And it was all about how you can subvert systems of oppression through laughter and joy. And so there's nothing more carnival in life than drag. And so, yeah, there is a seriousness in faith, but there's also great joy. And that's what drag helps tap into.
We're gonna find a clip or some pictures so we can show the participants in Hope and Anchor what Miss Pentecost looks like and what she sounds like. So we'll find some of that. But could you tell us a little bit about Miss Pentecost? Like, did you discover her? Did she discover you? What does it feel like to have her in you? Do you think of her that way? Is she part of the
absolutely
character you play? Like, tell us about her.
Yeah. So I like to say that Penny is like this inner part of me, is like everything that I've ever wanted to be, but was told I could never be in life. And so she is this like personification of all of that. Miss Penny is a 1960s church lady from the Midwest, where I'm from. And she is a bless your hearting, casserole making, good time, passive aggressive human being. Because for me, in my context of life, like that is the epitome of what faith and church is this like pseudo old lady who gives hugs and makes a mean casserole.
It's so interesting because it's like you said, it's like the parts of you that you've had to like bury, and yet it's also this really retro. Like it's proper old school vintage. So like, are you an old 1960s soul?
I am. Oh my gosh, tapioca pudding is my favorite pudding, and I eat ice cream every night. My bedtime is like 8 p.m. So I am very much an old person. But also oh my gosh, she is, because she is the ideal of what faith is, and I've been told that I can't be the ideal of what faith church is, what Christ has called us to be. She is me being like, no, I am. Like, I, as a queer person, as just a human being, can be the ideal that God created, just as you are, just as everyone is. So yeah.
So I have to be honest with you. In my thick-headedness, until I started thinking about the interview and reading more about you, I had not made the connection with your name to Pentecost.
Yes.
I feel so embarrassed by that, but I thought I'm going to be vulnerable and name it. Like, I love the story of Pentecost, but I was like, Miss Pentecost is Miss Pentecost. Tell us about that. So for those of you who, maybe for those of you who don't know the story of Pentecost, give us a quick snapshot of that story and why Penny imbues that story.
Yeah. So a bunch of people afraid after Christ died, locked themselves in a room, were real worried. And then all of a sudden, tongues of fire came down and gave them the ability to speak in new ways to new people. And they went out, and that's how evangelism happened. They were able to reach folks who were unreachable before. So that's quick little 10-second Pentecost story.
And so when you discovered Miss Pentecost, how do you say that your name, your
Miss Pentecost?
Miss Pentecost.
Yes.
When you discovered her, or she discovered you, did the name come quite quickly, or was that something that you got a name from God, or how did that work?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So actually, Penny, when I was finally like, no, I'm gonna do drag, it was for the United Methodists out there listening, I was at annual conference, which is like our annual gathering to talk about all the church happenings.
Stuff.
That it happened to be around the time of Pentecost. And so the theme was fired up. And so I was fired up for drag. For me, Penny and drag is my way of reaching, just as the disciples, my way of reaching folks who weren't able to be reached before, my way of speaking in a new language to new people. Because for so many queer folks specifically, there is a lot of holy baggage that comes with going to a church or talking to a pastor. And so Penny is able to be this language that allows conversations to happen that would never happen if I was wearing a collar and a black shirt. Yes.
So instead you're wearing...
Instead I am wearing a bejeweled alb and oh, that's the other thing is Penny typically wears red hair because the red hair is my physical reminder of my language, the tongue of fire on my
fire. Yes.
And so it is huge, always huge. Yeah.
I want to come to this church. I feel like every person I'm talking to for Hope and Anchor, I'm doing all these wonderful interviews. They're all saying things that I'm like, I want to come to your church.
Yes.
Let's talk about language, because let's talk about evangelism. I mean, evangelism, we could have a whole, obviously.
Oh, what a dirty word.
I do want to talk about it, but basically I think of evangelism as like speaking the good news of God and Jesus Christ, listening for it in the voices of others, maybe especially others we don't expect to hear it in, and then living it out. But central, for me at least, to evangelism is the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. And we talk about that in different ways. I'm curious, as you're doing drag, as Miss Pentecost is doing drag, how does she answer the question, if someone came up on one of her acts and said, Miss Pentecost, what's the gospel? What would she say?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think for me, it is that through Christ, God is able to experience the reality of human life, the good, the bad, the ugly. And with that, in all of the sorrows of our lives as queer people, Christ is there with us, with an arm around us, teaching us to breathe in and out through it to get us through it all. I think the gospel is that we are all enough, and that there is grace and mercy and love that ever flows to each of us, and that is accessible within each of us, that we are worthy of connection not only to God and to neighbor, but also to ourselves, that there is this deep connection.
That's a
deep
beautiful
love and
answer.
deep worthiness. Yeah.
It's a beautiful answer. If someone at one of those drag shows, or maybe at Hope Church in Bloomington, said it's been a real crap 2 years, Isaac or Miss Pentecost, like it's been crap. That gospel you just described sounds so powerful, but it's been a crap 2 years, and I'm curious.
Yeah.
I can imagine them asking you, what difference has that gospel made in your life in this past 2 years? What would you say?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So funny, 2 years ago, I took a mental health leave of absence from Illinois Wesleyan University. And 2 years ago was also when Penny was born. So being able to lean into that message of like, I am an active part of creation and I am creating these connections within me and outside of me. That has quite literally saved my life, but has also allowed me to for the lack of a better way to describe it, to be able to connect and listen to folks' stories better and better, to be able to hear and to, we always say that pastors like to dwell with each other, like dwell with the neighbor. But to be able to like really sit and empathize and just be like, yeah, life sucks. This all sucks right now. COVID-19 sucks. It did not come from God, but God is present in us and with us through it all.
Beautiful.
And typically when I say things like that, the person sitting next to me at the bistro, tear kind of rolls down. And I'm like, oh my God, please don't cry. But yeah, that's the other thing, is that the most powerful conversations I have are in the basements of gay bars while getting ready in drag with other drag artists, or sitting at the bar table. It's the day-to-day things, the unexpected.
When I hear you describe that, I can feel my own heart kind of swell a bit. And I think I'm deeply convinced that for all of us, having a felt sense of the good news contemporarily, currently, like that is the gift that God is always offering us, But when we have that encounter, it is life-changing, and the good news is, part of the good news is it's not just a one-time thing, right? That more is always on offer from God. I don't mean that in a capitalistic, acquisitive way, but like deeper, the immeasurable riches of God's grace available to us.
Absolutely.
And,
not so much like the arcade, I have a token, let me receive some grace, but in the sense that like it's always there. It's always there.
Amen.
Yeah.
Oh, love hearing you talk. When I was getting ready for the interview with you, I remembered, and I hadn't thought about this in a while. When I was in seminary in Britain, we call that training college. But when I was in seminary, way long time ago, probably before you were born, it was in Atlanta in the late 90s. And almost every Sunday night, we would go down to the Gospel Girls, who were a drag act in this little gay bar in Atlanta. And it was packed out. And Morticia DeVille and the Gospel Echoes put on church.
That is incredible.
Sang the hymns, and she talked about Jesus, and she did a comedy act. And there was this ritual during the high church medley, which is like basically to God be glory. We had like all of our drinks napkins. We did this little ritual. I mean, it was church. For me, I was working in a church at that time as a youth pastor. So like I had been to church in the morning. I'd been reading theology in the afternoon, but it was church. And for many people, it was their church. So I'm just curious, like that was Morticia DeVille's evangelism set. What is Miss Pentecost's evangelism set? Like, what does your preach look like? Is there music involved? Like what happens when you get up there?
Oh my gosh. I wish I could sing. that is not one of the gifts that God gave me.
All right.
Yeah, I'm awful. No one wants to hear that. So it's different in different contexts. So if I am performing at a bar, I typically have like one comedy type deal, like comedy churchy type number, and then I also have like some secular things as well, because like God is in everything, including Cardi B. So bring some of that in. But like my most recent, so last weekend I performed in a very small town called Ivesdale. Have you heard of it? No. It's population 350. It was me and 4 other queens, and my churchy number was a VeggieTales mix of I Love My Lips, and it was that, and then Meghan Trainor, Lips Are Moving. And so, yeah, that was in honor of Phil Vishker, who had a lot of things to say about my drag. But I digress. Anyways,
about later.
The voice of Bob the Tomato. So it's a way of uplifting some of the harmful, oppressive theology that exists out there, and being like, there are other ways to go about faith in the crowds. As far as being in a church context, as Miss Penny, she is typically dolled up to the nines. I always wear pearl necklaces because there typically is some pearl clutching that happens, and I want to partake in that too. So I do that, and then it's always all of my messages tend to go back to the sense that we are all enough, that I am enough, you are enough, we collectively are enough, and we are strong enough together to commit change within the systems that we're a part of, through collective liberation and some Gustavo Gutierrez type deal. Yeah, that's typically the message, is that if a drag queen can do this, anyone can. Yeah.
I love thinking about your pearls and like that scriptural image of the pearl of great price, which is the thing that, you know, in the gospel, like we're searching for that hidden wisdom and truth, but also I think it is in us. It's God's gift in us, so that pearl of great price is in us. So, you know, just thinking about that in your act.
I didn't even think about that.
Work that in, honey. Work it in.
That's gonna make it in a sermon.
You don't even have to quote me. It's just from the Bible.
Yeah. Citations.
A couple of things you were saying made me think about a question I want to ask. You said you were was it St. Ives? No, not St. Ives. Where were you?
Ivesdale.
Ivesdale.
Yes.
St. Ives is a little small place in Britain.
Oh.
And I was just thinking about, and someone else had said this, your pastor at Hope, I heard her say this, that your ministry is not, sometimes you think about drag or inclusive church or radical inclusion as like a particularly urban or citified
thing. Yeah.
And Absolutely. She was saying, like, actually, you do all this ministry. I mean, for those who don't know it, Bloomington Normal is not a big city. It's like in the middle of the cornfields.
Yeah.
And here you are at Ivesdale. And so I think there is that stereotype sometimes that like cities are inclusive, rural places are not inclusive. And it just sounds like you're sort of bucking that stereotype and breaking that binary down.
Yeah, like I am here to break down all the dichotomies, all the false dichotomies, that there is only this and nothing in between. And I don't know, there is great beauty in urban settings, in the sense that there is diversity that is implicit in the air that is breathed in arguably in many spaces. That is not the case in many rural settings. And yet, there are folks all over the countryside and the cornfields who yearn for that message of love, who who, thanks to the internet, have seen it in other places but have never experienced it face to face. And so to be able to go to a place like Ivesdale, where it was the opener for our drag show was a local country music band, and almost everyone was wearing camouflage of some form, and to be able to lip sync to VeggieTales as a drag queen and be introduced as a future minister in drag, it unlocked so many conversations afterwards. So I would try to like beeline it back to the dressing room, which was small bathroom for all of us, and I would be stopped and people would talk about their stories. I'm like, yes, thank you. I would love to talk more about this after I am not performing, but yes, it's really beautiful how just a bit of joy can unlock or disarm so many of the safeguards that we have built to protect ourselves from further harm. Yeah.
It sounds like when you were talking about this bar where you're performing, there's a country western opening act, there are folks in camouflage, I can see that place. I can see it because I've been there.
Yeah.
And it felt, but what I went to was like, that's the room where the Holy Spirit came at Pentecost. That's the room where all these people of diversity were in that room. It was everything in that room, the first century. And here you are with camouflage and drag queens, country western music and VeggieTales. And here it comes. I mean, Lord Jesus, that is just so powerful. I think lots of people who are committed people of faith, Christian faith, love God deeply and want others to know Jesus and experience the grace of God, and are still a bit nervous about evangelism. And it sounds like it's a joy for you. I'm sure it's both comfortable, but also I imagine you get yourself in some places where there is some discomfort.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, welcome to being a human, like if you're actually living in the world. But like, what's your top, if you're addressing people, which you are at Hope and Anchor, people who really care about faith and want to share the good news and listen for the good news, what's your top tip? Maybe they're not going to get dressed up in drag, but what's your top tip for anybody who wants to do evangelism in an inclusive way?
Yeah, top tip: spend 3 hours getting into drag and then go talk. No, I would say find that thing that you're passionate about, and then think about while partaking in that. So whether it's fixing cars or whether it's going for bike rides, think about where divinity dwells in that. And once you find that kind of holy motivation for the why, like why am I passionate about this? Oh, it's because whatever, I connect spiritually or anything. To use that as an entrance, as a starting point. Not in the sense that every time you go to, I don't know, the Tour de France, if you're a bike rider, be like, this is God. This is like, this whole race is divinely inspired. But
Jesus is on this bike with you right now.
Jesus is racing. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. The Holy Trinity on a tricycle. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I just said that. But to be like to quote Saint Francis, to preach the gospel, but when necessary, use words. To like have it be in all the actions and everything that you do. Because that's where conversations happen. Most of the conversations that I have start not by me being like, I'm a future minister, but to be like, when I introduce myself, I am Miss Pentecost, and someone's like, oh my gosh, I grew up Pentecostal, here is all this stuff. And so it's a kind of backdoor approach to it all.
It sounds like that quote from St. Francis of preach the gospel at all times, if necessary, use words. But it sounds like you're also saying, but always be ready for a conversation. So it's
that's it. Yeah.
I think sometimes people who are really nervous about evangelism, they'll quote St. Francis and be like, I never have to say anything. All I have to do is live my life. And I'm like, actually, we're all called to give a message of hope. We're all called to have a conversation. Am I putting words in your mouth?
No, absolutely. It is.
I do that sometimes.
It is don't start with a conversation, but there's going to be one. And because if you are doing the thing, if you're doing the gospel message thing in life, those conversations are inevitably going to come up, either for the good or for the bad. Someone will, like for me, conversations tend to come in the most inopportune times. Like I said, either on my way back to the dressing room or when I am just trying to have a relaxing night out. I'm like, we're not going to do ministry tonight. It's not going to happen. God, it's not going to happen tonight. I want a day off. And then I meet someone and I hear a part of their story. And then pretty soon we're talking faith and life. And then they show up to my church on Sunday. Yeah.
Someone on social media, I put up that I was going to talk to you last week and ask people to sort of share questions. And someone asked lots of beautiful questions, including, have you ever thought about trying out for RuPaul's Drag Race? Have you?
Yes. No, because I don't have talent.
Oh,
no, I'm not a talent queen. No, I don't know. I don't think I would do very well in it. If I was going to try out for any game show, it would be Jeopardy. Because once again, I am an old lady and love my Jeopardy. So that is the answer to that.
Okay.
Maybe not RuPaul. Come on, Jeopardy.
Come on, Jeopardy. Oh gosh, all these intersections. The question that I was thinking of before that, which is a great question, is they were asking about your identity as an evangelist, and they were saying, trying to remember how they phrase it, but basically the role of the evangelist is both to invite people into church. I don't think they were saying like into the building necessarily, though but like to invite new people,
capital C.
To explore the gospel community, but also to invite the church, the faith community, into the world to listen for the good news and to speak the good news. So it's like both directions.
Absolutely.
And he was curious how you experience those directions. Like, is your ministry about one more than the other? Is it about both?
Oh my gosh, that is a very, very good question. I think that originally, before, because I only very recently started diving more into the drag ministry of my stuff as a way to reclaim a harmful narrative that was being shared. And so now I would say it is very much for me as Isaac, as a cis white man seeking ordination within a church. My role as Isaac is to work within the church to point towards the world that we live in and to point towards a tomorrow in which all of us may thrive together, and to say that there is good and there is beauty and that there is change that is necessary within our system. And then as Penny, much of what I do is to be in the community and to point at the church and be like, this stuff sucks. Sometimes there has been so much harm, and no wonder you don't want to step foot in a church. Like, I do not blame you. Like, there, like, horrible things have happened in the name of God, falsely in the name of God. And yet it is not that theology and that bad news is not the only news, and not the only theology, and not the only way to go through life. And so to be a queer person in a space who is also Christian, I can also point to a future system, a future church in which all people may thrive. So do a lot of pointing. Yeah.
Love it. This may be, many people who are watching Hope and Anchor may have never seen a drag queen. Though RuPaul's Drag Race is quite popular in Britain as well. So like many people have seen a drag queen. Many people have not had a chance to talk to a drag queen.
Yeah.
And I think for some people, like those things going together of like drag queen and representative of Jesus, like not to be opposed to it, it's just like, whoa.
Yeah, it's startling.
It's startling and wonderful, in my opinion, obviously. But I think there is, I read a quote that I don't know if you said it or someone said it of you, that, you know, the church is big enough for conservatives and liberals and everyone in between, including a drag queen. Yeah. God is big enough. And I was just like, oh, amen. And I'm just curious, what's your message for people of good faith who may disagree on things? What's your message for holding together or bridge building work while also being rooted in our values? What do you say into that space?
Oh my gosh, yes. So first I want to honor that discomfort that is felt when drag and church come together, because even in my church, Hope Church, which is like radically inclusive for Bloomington, Illinois, there was a parishioner who, the first time that I preached in drag, came up to me afterwards and said, you know, I had to close my eyes and experience your words without seeing anything. And then being able to open them and see Penny saying the same words in the voice of Isaac, that it unlocked something new. But there was a jarring discomfort at first, like, why is this happening? So with that in mind, I think my greatest message would be to lean ever so slightly into that discomfort and really give honor to the question marks that are swirling around your head. I'm a firm believer that the most divine punctuation mark is the question mark, because it leads to so much more. And we have questions for a reason. So if you are able to take a moment and get to the root of the question, to sometimes the initial question isn't the question that we are all, that you want to ask. So they're like the initial question of, why is there drag in church? If you dwell with that for a moment, it could come from, why is there a queer person in power in the church? Like, where can God speak through queer folks? And that is a deeper question that can be kind of, you can pull the strings of and explore more. And whatever answer you get to on the other side of that, that is your answer. But divinity is walking along us on that path to the answer.
Well, the quotable quote there is, is the most divine punctuation mark is a question mark. And I love that. And I've heard so many sermons talk about how Jesus asks more questions in the gospel than he provides answers, which I think is a great sermon. I mean, maybe we've all picked the sermon, but I love the way you've encapsulated it, like the most divine punctuation mark is a question mark. Questions lead us deeper into conversations, right? I love that. And the gospel, if it's not taking us deeper into the stuff, then it's probably not the gospel. It's probably something fake, It's not, it's just the false gospel. So you're asking us by God's grace to push in, lean in.
I mean, there's a reason why Christ spoke in parables so often, and everyone was like, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you please be more specific? Because there are questions there. And I think of like anytime someone tried to confront Jesus, like, well, what are your thoughts on XYZ? And Christ was like, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to get to a deeper question. And there's just such beauty and power and almost there. I like to think of it as like almost a self-liberation. So whenever we ask someone else questions, I think we're asking ourselves those questions too. And when we explore those, we're able to go deeper within us and liberate a part of us that was closed off before.
So I have one, if you have time, I have one more question and then a last sort of sign off, if that's okay. Do you have 5 more minutes? Is that okay?
Absolutely. Bring it on.
So much. I know we're a little over time, but I really appreciate it. So at Hope and Anchor, we are always encouraging people to take risks, to take missional risks, to be brave and to walk outside of what you expect, what the norm is, and to trust that God is already ahead of you, because God is leading the way. We're following God. We're not bringing God anywhere. God is already there. But to experiment, to innovate, to take those steps takes a lot of courage. And sometimes you take that risk and it goes beautifully. And sometimes you take that risk and Lord, you fall off the stage, or whatever. Like sometimes it goes wrong. And I'm just curious if you'd be willing to share, amidst all the brilliance and pearls of great price that you are offering. Can you tell a time where like it hasn't gone right, it's gone wrong, you fell apart? What happened and what did you learn?
Well, so funny you should ask. I am out of time. No.
My time is up.
I gotta go. So just as being a queer person in a church is there's like some discomfort there, being a Christian in the queer community can be a little uncomfortable as well too. And sometimes these little conversations we have are not, I should not have had the conversation. I should have just been like, like, this is who I am, whatever, I'm gonna go do my thing. Because there's also, just with any trauma in life, holy trauma is present and it leaves bloody scars. And people, to have a conversation, both people have to be ready for the conversation. And if one is still bleeding and hurting from it, it might not be the best time to have that conversation, to instead just be like, I hear you, I see you, let's go dance. Sometimes it's not like, well, here is the theological reason of why the Clobber passages are blah, 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 blah. And it's not the time. So I would say that's happened.
You've maybe done a little Christian splaining, a little drag splaining. Okay. So. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for being honest about that. I think there's so much in a world where we're like always talking about how amazing we are, and we are.
Yes. As an Enneagram 3, I can relate.
This Enneagram 3 sees you with the 4 wings, so extra special. Anyway, that's a good. We should talk about the Enneagram. I hope an anchor, but you know, amidst our amazingness, we also, we get it wrong and we mess up. And I'm just really grateful for your willingness to talk about a time where you did, because we do and we will again. And welcome to being human. Yeah. It's how we kind of, I think, respond to those things when they happen is what makes us either a healthy human or a really locked in the room kind of human. Okay, last question. So it's not going to be RuPaul's Drag Race, but let's say you're at well, you're in San Francisco for a big street festival right now.
Yes.
About, and I'm just going to imagine. I want you to imagine that you're walking down the street at the festival, and someone sees you, and there's a big rally going on, a big kind of party, and someone pulls you up on stage. They know you're a person of faith, and they say, Miss Pentecost, would you just give us a blessing? Would you just give us a charge? Would you just give us a benediction? And here you are looking over thousands of people, different faiths, different races, different sexualities. What do you say to that crowd to bless them?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think to lean back on some Isaiah going on, to say
the prophet, you mean? The
prophet. Yeah. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. And just turn to the person next to you and say, don't be afraid, because I am with you. I am here with you in all that you do. We are our greatest assets in life is community and connectedness. And if we can be there for each other, not only in pain and sorrow, but in protest and in laughter and in joy, then we can do anything. Anything can be changed, anything can be burnt to the ground, and anything can be rebuilt in the beauty of God and in love. So don't be afraid, I'm with you. Yeah.
I bet I could see that. I could see people receiving that and maybe even believing that for themselves and for others. Isaac Simmons, thank you so much for the conversation today. It has been interesting. It has been it's been practical. I know you're going to have the kind of the sharing you done will, I think, will encourage people to take steps out. And I just feel, in all these conversations in Hope and Anchor, I feel my soul is just restored a little more every time I talk with people who are, living out the gospel and bearing it into this world, which is broken, but also beautiful. So thank you. Thank you for your ministry.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. This was an absolute treat. Yes.
It's, I will look forward to meeting you sometime maybe at a drag show in Ivedale or someplace else.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I am preaching on October 10th at, I don't know if this is going to be out by then, but at the Inclusive Gathering Birmingham. So.
All right. I was part of that community back in the day, was part of the planting team that helped start that. So I'm no longer, I live in London now, but the Danielle sister had shared that you were going to be doing that. So I'd forgotten. That's wonderful. Oh, so you got to.
So perhaps I'll be over in Britain, over in the UK area sometime down the road.
You're an international evangelist now. I love it. All right. Great talking to you. Have fun in San Francisco and blessings on the travel back to Bloomington.
Thank you.
Keep it real. Bye.